Hello, sir.
Oh, this has been a long time coming, I think.
It, it has. It has. It's good to see you in the flesh, so to speak.
Yes, yes,
Right?
I know you've seen so many iterations of me in movies, but yeah. And that is an impressive collection you have in the back there. My God, that is
Oh,
awesome.
thank you. Everybody likes to notices that. Yeah, and it's on both sides too. So both sides are full.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. That's
see,
awesome.
you can tell the caliber of people we are, though. You have wonderful collection of books behind you. I have all these movies.
Yes, yeah. Notice my books are like, they're hid in the back room here. My wife, she's taken all of our bookcases and she's into Legos. She
Ah.
works at a Lego store, and so all of my bookcases are now filled with Legos, whereas my lonely, sad little books and play scripts are back here, off like just hid away from the world. So
Nothing wrong with like that's awesome that you get that's cool. I want to come over to the house and see the Lego stuff. Legos are
oh,
cool, you know.
it's impressive. I mean, we have my wife Jamie, she works at it's a Lego store here in Dayton called the Dayton Brick Shop, and
Mhm.
they have everything Lego that you could possibly want, like Star Wars, Harry Potter, the Avengers, and people come from all over. I think there was someone once that came in from Indiana, like to get a specific
Wow.
Lego Star Wars collectible piece, and they're not cheap either. So they definitely drop top dollar.
Lego is crazy like that. That cost never they've always been pricey.
Yeah,
Yeah, but yet everybody there's so many people that are into them. I mean, I was into them as a kid. I still into them, not so much now. When my boys were little, they
sure.
liked Legos, which was great because it's like, I'll help you build, and then they're off playing something, and I'm sitting there building the Lego set. So,
Oh yeah, my we'll be sitting there watching TV, and my wife will build the Home Alone house or the Disney castle, and it's just like, but my books.
your books. Well, you got a creative household then. I mean,
We
you know,
do, yeah. It's nice, and it's turned into a really nice hobby for my wife, like to be able
mhm,
to do that. Like I imagine it's very like reading is my like relaxation. Legos is
sure.
hers, so it's great.
And watching movies is mine. So, and
I like that too, and of course, this time of year, with all
Mm.
of the with the Oscar nominations coming out, and but
Yeah.
so it's a lot of excitement in the air.
There is. Well, I just did like a 2 hour podcast with a good friend of mine, a critic from Chicago, Don Shanahan. We went through all the Oscars. I avoided Oscar talk like all day, and I let it surprise me, and I was surprised. I will I will say I was surprised. Um, but I am also surprised that I finally get the chance to talk to you because I've covered your work for a while now. I realize
It's got to be over 10 years, I think.
oh, I
I
I
think I'm
started
not
I
sure.
started
Yeah.
covering. I did my first review of your work. I think when you reached out to me, it was 2017
Oh
was
wow.
when I reviewed your work, and then you managed to send me some of your earlier stuff.
Hmm.
But it was To Be Alone about
Oh, oh,
the grieving gentleman with his faith,
yeah.
and
That's a that's a favorite. That's a favorite. Anything that I do with Matthew Mailer is a joy, even though
Mhm.
that was. But no, that was a good one. I like that one.
That was a good one. I mean, these are indie shorts that you work on a lot of. You've also worked on features,
Hmm.
and but you really have carved a niche. And I was just looking over your body of work here. You know, a large 148 credits to your name that are already made, and that's just your acting. You've
Hmm.
also written and produced, even
Hmm.
directed a film as well. I mean, you are a man of many talents. So
You know what? Thank you. I mean, like I love this work. I love doing it because the beautiful thing about it is that, you never stop learning. You mean with new technologies and things like that. And it's an adventure. I mean, it's always fun. Like I learn something new every time I step onto a film set. And so and that if you could go into your work and still have that kind of excitement and curiosity about it. That makes it, the adventure of it, so incredibly rewarding and fun.
And you get to play a wide variety of characters, and
Hmm.
it's not just one genre either, I noticed either. I mean, you've done horror, comedy, you've done drama, uh, almost like a biopic of sorts,
Yeah,
it
it's nice, like, to try to have a career that's, to challenge myself, because
Mhm,
like, in different kinds of genres, different kinds of parts,
mhm,
and that's always been the goal, like,
mhm,
just always about being just the variety. Because when I graduated from college in 1999, I didn't think about doing film. I wanted to be a good a good supporting actor in the theater. I wanted to
mhm.
do Shakespeare and Chekhov and, all of the all of the money makers,
Sure, sure.
and didn't really think about working in film. But then going to New York, in between working in the theater, they have a wonderful opportunities there to work with young filmmakers, student
Right.
filmmakers at NYU, New York Film Academy, and you kind of jumped at it, and I kind of jumped at it, and it took some time, though,
Mhm.
because when you're coming from the theater and going into film, it's completely different, because
Sure.
there's so many
Mhm,
things about all of the technical aspects, and all of that, that you have to kind of come to terms with, because when you're an actor on a film set, there's so many things that go into the making of a movie, as you know, that Alec Baldwin has the line: if you're on a film set for 15 to 16 hours, you may act for 45 minutes.
right.
And it's
Mhm,
true in some cases. I mean, in indies, things tend to move a little much faster, which is nice, 'cause
right.
it's kind of exciting. But yeah, no, I mean, I've been very lucky.
Mhm,
I mean, and that's a lot of that plays such a role, and working with the right people, and
mhm,
in this past year, taking the leap and writing something like After, and working on Hard Truths, and I don't know, it was just the time had come to, like, to see if I could do it. Really,
mhm.
that's the thing. And I'm very proud of those two films, especially of recent stuff that I've done.
Yeah, After and Hard Truths were definitely interesting films. I mean, all with your being shorts, they're usually character driven, so that
Yeah.
gives you a chance. And I imagine that plays into your theatrical background.
Hmm.
Um, and I've heard that from other folks too who have made the transition from stage to film. They're like, on one hand, you get to do a takeover if you have to, versus on stage when you're in front of a live audience. And I've performed in front of live folks. I did a improv comedy troupe in
Oh.
college,
Oh, sure.
so we did comedy sports stuff. So it's like, you're in a live performance, you get one chance. It's not like, oh, can I just do that again? Could I do
And in the theater, I mean, whatever happens, happens.
right?
And it's kind of exciting, unless, of course, I mean, I've been in cases where someone, the actor you're acting opposite, skips 5 or 6 pages, and then you have to try to, and it's especially difficult when you're doing Shakespeare. That's
Oh,
because,
I imagine, yeah.
trying to do it in iambic pentameter, but that's fun. But yeah, no, film, you get to. But I think also about the difference between, like, with the theater training, that the training that actors who work in the theater receive. I think you're able to really, pace yourself as
Mhm,
an actor on a film set, like, knowing when, like, okay, how much, like, volume and control
mhm,
of your voice, basically control of your instrument, and able to endure long days, because if anything, you have your training to really fall back on, and just, you know to kind of just pace yourself, kind of like an athlete. I think
mhm,
that's why, you have to take care of yourself, especially, there, in the case of After,
mhm.
that that's a 12, 13 page script, a two-hander, very, very heavy material.
Yeah.
And Beth Metcalf and we rehearsed it
Mhm,
like a play. And the way, when we came in and shot it, shot the scenes in long continuous takes, which Beth and I were able to do, because of
Sure.
our respective theater training, and it added an excitement to it
Mhm.
that, like not doing, a page here and stopping and resetting the camera, that there was an excitement and electricity to it that was fun to do. And so I have to credit the stage training for that.
Yeah, and, I think it's one of the things. I'm glad you mentioned the longer takes because, there's a number of films too. You did, Hard Truths as well, has
Mhm.
longer dialogue takes where it's just the two shot of
Yeah.
you 2 and the dialogue back and forth, and I think until people see longer shots, they don't realize how many cuts are in modern films when they're
Hmm.
watching. I think what is the average? Something like 30 or some cuts at least, if not more, within a
Oh,
minute.
yeah. Oh, especially on TV shows, like
Yeah.
a network TV show, yes. And that's just the format, the way that
Mhm.
those shows are done. But I like long continuous
Mhm.
takes, because when you're doing a scene, if you have a partner that is really, and if you've rehearsed, or even if you haven't rehearsed, um, in the case of Hard Truths, all of the dialogue in that film was completely improvised.
Oh,
So
okay.
we
Mhm.
so the film was all developed through improvisation.
Mhm.
Now we had a lot of, Paige Hoover and
Sure.
myself and my Ahmed. We had a lot of discussions, and we knew where we wanted to take certain
Mhm.
sequences, but the speech that, you know Paige, her
Mhm.
character says to me, that was all completely from her
Wow.
own
Mhm.
experiences, which really is extraordinary. Because that's I don't know. There's something from that with longer takes, you're able to be more natural, I think.
Mhm.
Be more natural and relaxed, and, take your time and not rush through it. And no, and again, there's something, and as Peter Sellers would always say, there are always those happy accidents that
Yeah.
happen
Yeah.
in moments like that,
Sure.
which I love. I love those moments.
Yeah, and I always enjoyed longer takes. I'm always impressed, when you see these one take type films or where you've got longer takes and conversations. I like that because I realize, what's going into that because you can't quite reset. Oh, set to this point, and we'll just go from here. You pretty much have to start if you're gonna continue with that continuous shot or that long shot. You got to kind of okay, we got to start from beat one and go again.
Yeah. Well, think of
And
like Birdman. I mean,
yeah.
Birdman, that whole movie they had to the timing of
Mhm.
all of that. I mean, if someone doesn't quite hit their mark, or flubs a line or whatever, you got to go back and do that over again. I think the same thing with The Revenant.
Mhm.
And it's exciting. It's
Right.
exciting that filmmakers that do that. But you got to be on your toes constantly.
There's a lot of blocking going on before this.
Oh, yeah, a lot of preparation. And it's one of those things where not only the actors, but, like, the crew and all of
Mhm.
that. I would imagine that it's on big films like Birdman or
Sure.
The Revenant, that it's very, very
Mhm.
stressful. Because of course, especially in The Revenant, where there are a lot of those battle scenes, which are, a lot of effects and things
Yeah.
like that. So, uh,
Well, and
yeah,
then there was the, World War One film that came, 1918, I think it
yeah,
was, that came out that was all one. That Yeah, the long continuous shot, whether it's just 2 people, like, some of the shorts you've done where it's just 2 people talking or especially when you get into the battle, when it's one long shot, you're more emotionally invested too because it's not even subconsciously breaking it up. You're really feel like you're getting a window into reality
yeah.
because in reality, it's not like I'm here and then I walk up the stairs and I talk to my wife and we're doing 3 shots or whatever and you're seeing although that would be kind of interesting.
Mhm.
Um,
And I think that was the intention, especially with After and with Hard Truths, is that you wanted to show, even with short films, they are just short glimpses or vignettes
mhm,
into these situations, these scenarios, where I always want an audience walking away with questions, like
Sure.
and everyone's going to come away with something different, and that's good because it sparks a discussion. If people can connect to the stories, and always leave the audience guessing and wanting more, but if you can show that glimpse into reality, I think people connect to that much, much more.
Yeah, they definitely do, and it's just the emotional response. I think is stronger with stuff like that, and
Sure.
it surprises me when you mentioned Hard Truths was improv
Mm,
because I've watched over the 12 years now, almost 13 that I've covered indie films. You can tell sometimes when they're improv. Sometimes, and it's not a bad thing. It's just the
mm,
natural thing, the way they're shooting. Either stuff is kind of repeated a little
mm,
or whatnot, but the real good improv, like with Hard Truths, you can't tell. It feels like a natural conversation, but I know the challenge of improv, so I'm always impressed when someone decides to take that bold step of going, okay, you got to hit this point and this point, but how you get there, just go.
Well, and the thing about like a good example of improvisation in, and because in movies it's not the most preferred and
Right.
ideal way to work, but I wanted to try it as as an experiment, for the actors that were cast, because I knew that this specific group of actors could do it. They
Mhm.
were all wonderful to work with. But with that, you have to be so specific. And I think those are the discussions that Paige and Maya and Tom Angeletti and I had about, okay, well, we don't want to have broad strokes. We want to be very, very specific.
Mhm.
And I think that's where the strength lies. And I think that's in the film lies, I think. And that's where people are connecting, is that
Mhm.
there's the relatability. They're like, oh, I can relate to that specifically. And anyone that watches this, who's ever experienced any kind of, in the
Mhm.
modeling industry or the music or the comedy or the acting world, it's like those kinds of stories do exist. And so
Right.
I think the more specific we knew we were, that's what it was going to take for the film to be successful.
And then, with After, it's not your first run with dealing with grief. You seem to pull these parts a bit.
And it's funny, I started out when I started out in the theater, I did almost exclusively comedy,
Oh,
like
okay. Sure.
Shakespeare and Neil
Mhm.
Simon and all of that. And but yeah, I don't know. Like someone said to me, like, and they meant this as a compliment. They said I have that kind of a face that like there's a joy but a sadness
Mhm.
behind it. And they said that's how people always describe Jack Lemmon, who's
Yeah.
my idol. That like
Mhm.
he that and I take that as a compliment because, but yeah, I have been on the grief train for a while. I think
A
gotta
little
do
bit.
gotta do a little bit, gotta do something. Yeah, between To Be Alone and After and Hard Truths is kind
It's a
of a
little it's
downer.
a bit of heavy too, yeah.
Yeah, I said
Though
I need a comedy. Yeah.
though you get to play the hard nose once in a while too, like, was it, Cephas?
Oh,
Cephas
Sisyphus
Unbo
Unbound. Oh,
Cephas, yeah.
yeah, that was fun. That
Mhm.
part was you went and one, it was incredibly well written. Ryan
Sure,
Fleming, who
yeah.
wrote that, and just the part that character reminded me of an acting teacher that I had in college. Now he
Sure.
was not quite as
Yeah.
blunt, but
Mhm.
he was. I would say this teacher was probably about 50-60% of what Professor Lehman was. And just, the chance to like really
Mm.
tear into somebody. And of course, Frederick, who was is the
Mm.
nicest, one of the nicest
Yeah,
people on the planet. Um, we would just laugh afterwards. It's like, oh
sure.
my God, this guy is terrible. But you love those kinds of parts
Mhm.
because you sink your teeth, because those people exist. There are people
Yeah.
out
Oh,
there.
yeah.
We've all had that boss or that manager or that
Mhm.
teacher that they just take a certain delight in breaking people down for their own amusement.
For their own, because they couldn't quite make it, so therefore they, the other person, you're gonna be, I'm gonna put you down. I wasn't given a break, so why should I give you even a break?
And that was really the if there was a backstory to
Sure.
this man, that was kind of when I went in, I thought, okay, this kid's getting the shot that I said no to 25, 30 years
Right.
before. I'm going to let him have it because there's the resentment. And,
Mhm.
it's sad, but like, but I think in the end, I think Frederick's character gets a nice little dig. He gets
Oh
he
yeah,
gets his digs in. He definitely
he
gets his
does.
digs in.
And you kind of need that, I think, a lot of times, and some films miss that, to where you get an a-hole character of some sort or whatnot, and you want to see someone get their dig in on that person to take
Oh
them
yeah.
back down a peg, but you seem to be enjoying that role, because it was kind of a taking aback. I was like, oh man, I'm like, he's playing kind of a, he's playing a character I'm not quite used to seeing you play, in a good way though. I mean, I always like seeing actors take on roles you're not used to seeing them
Hmm.
in. I mean, look at what Robin Williams got a resurgence in, like, his career. Not that he really needed it with comedy, but when everybody was like, "Holy crap, he can do drama." Look
Oh,
at
right. One hour photo alone.
oh,
I mean, it was
wow.
chilling. Underrated performance
No
that he
one
gave.
no one
No one
talks
ever talks
about
about that.
Yeah, no one ever talks about 1 hour photo enough. That's was like creepy. He impressed me. I always liked his drama, but I really liked him even though it was a smaller role in Fisher King. I
Yeah,
thought he was just
one of his best. I think one of his best. Well,
mhm,
John Lithgow had a really interesting thing about when he did Word According to Garp. They had
mhm,
said if no one had ever, if no one prior to that film had ever heard of Robin Williams from Mork and Mindy or the
right.
comedy, stand-up comedy, and that was the first thing of his that they saw, they would have said, "This guy's the greatest actor since Spencer Tracy."
Yeah.
Or like when Whoopi Goldberg, the first thing was The Color Purple,
Yeah.
like before
Hmm.
she really blew up, and like
Hmm.
extraordinary performances.
Hmm.
So it's nice when actors, you go out and you challenge, because
Hmm.
the more you do this, the more you want parts that kind of scare you.
Sure.
Like
Hmm.
when I first read the script for Sisyphus Unbound, I mean, you look at it and it's a very,
Yeah.
dialogue heavy part, but then you kind of there's something that clicks. And I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, I know this guy. Oh, this reminds me of so and so. Oh,
Hmm.
this would be fun to play. And says, oh God, I would just love to say that line and have it on film. That's
Yeah.
and then once you get excited about it, and you prepare, when you go in and you do it, you're just completely relaxed, and
Sure.
you just do it,
Hmm.
and it was fun.
Hmm.
I really enjoyed doing that. Yeah, Ryan Fleming and his crew. They're a nice group of kids,
Hmm.
and it's I think it's a fun movie.
What would you say would be your most challenging role that you've taken?
I have to say, the for me, the one that comes to mind, just because the movie Doll It Up.
Hmm.
Doll It Up, that was billed as a comedy, but for me it was never a comedy. And when
Hmm.
I read it, I thought, oh, this is like you connect with the material. It's
Hmm.
like this was about a man that and a very sad story about a man that cannot connect with another human being on a romantic or personal level,
Right.
and so he conjures up this world where he's going to have that, but with a blow up doll,
Yeah.
and that way he has all of the he has the control, but
Right.
he doesn't have to answer for
Right.
anything. I mean, and
Hmm.
anytime that things don't go his way, he could just get another one.
Just get another. Yeah.
I have to say it was the first and the only time to date that I have ever done anything close
Sure.
to an intimate kind of
Right.
scene. And I remember, I'm sitting there. I said, I'm sitting there in bed, and I'm on top of this blow up doll. I'm sitting there thinking about, God, I've been an actor for like 20 years at this point. I've never had, if I ever thought I was going to have this kind of a scene, I did not think my first was going to be
With a doll.
with
Yeah.
a doll. Now, if that's not funny, I don't know what is. But like, but I never, and I would have a lot. We would have discussions with Yalan Hu and
Mhm,
the writer director, and I never saw that as a comedy because
mhm.
I think the key thing about that movie is that it, depending on how you play it,
Yeah.
and all, if you play it wrong, if you play it
Mhm,
for laughs, it's just going to
mhm.
be a gross out kind of
Yeah.
film. But the way we approached it, and you play it completely straight and honest, and that in his mind he actually thinks that this is a real relationship,
Right.
and it
Yeah.
comes down to the fact of people who are just not, we're not communicating with each other, we're on social media or we're sniping at each other, and I thought that it was saying something more about where we are in the world. So I think that was probably one of the most challenging
Mhm.
and fun. I mean, I got a chance
Sure.
to go down to Florida to do it, and Florida State University is where Barry Jenkins attended.
Mhm,
So they have a wonderful film program, and I was
mhm.
happy to be a part of that.
Yeah, that one's a bit more tragedy than a comedy
Yeah,
in a way.
yeah,
Uh, a sad tragedy, and that's a prime example of stuff. Depending on how the performer plays it, can completely change the tone of what that material was intended to be,
sure.
whether intentionally or unintentionally. I mean, you look at how much flack when House of Gucci came out. And, it's supposed to be a somewhat satirical, yet, kind of look at the Gucci empire, and no one could get past the bad Italian accent.
No. Well, it's like Dustin Hoffman talked about Tootsie. Like for
Sure.
Tootsie,
Mhm.
he never thought that was a comedy, and it's the same thing. Like Jack Lemmon never thought The Apartment was a comedy.
Mm, mhm.
I mean, these were movies that, yes, they're very, very funny, but also the characters. Dustin Hoffman, I'm butchering the quote of what he said. He wanted to play, if he were a woman,
Mhm.
he would not find that she was, as Dorothy Michaels, is not someone that he would approach at a party because
Right.
she did not have, at, as he
Mhm.
thought, that the looks that
Right.
people would find attractive. And he said that's why, that he
Mhm.
wanted to play that. And I remembered that when we were doing Doll It Up, because that this guy, I connected with him
Sure.
on a
Mhm.
level. The character of Gunther, which is also just a great name. Like, to
Yeah.
play a character named Gunther. I don't think his name is mentioned once in the entire movie, but
Sure.
no, it was tough
Mhm.
because when you're doing, especially kind of in any kind of intimate scene. I mean, I think all of the scenes, I think there's an intimacy to them, like, because you're vulnerability that if you
Mhm.
allow it.
Mhm.
But yeah, that was tough. To be alone was tough as
Mhm.
well. Just I think that film, I worked on that not long after my brother passed away, and
Oh.
I
Mhm.
and I have kind of like, I was raised Catholic, but I'm not
Mhm.
really I'm
Sure.
non-practicing.
Yep.
And so it was interesting playing a man who's so devoted to
Mhm.
his faith, and, questioning, is the validity of
Mhm.
his faith, and all of that. And so that was very interesting to play around with. But again, I mean, anything, I would do anything with Matthew Mailer. So
Mhm. And when you play a character like that, I imagine you've got to be in a specific headspace to kind of bring that character out. How do you get yourself out of those headspaces? Is it easy for you for some of the characters you play, or does it take some time to kind of like get back, just cut yourself off so you can come back to being Timothy again?
yeah, usually, I'm usually able to shake it off. Like, I leave
Hmm.
work at work.
Sure.
The only time that I've ever had a character that it took time to shake. About 5 years ago, I did a play
Hmm.
called Art by Yasmina Reza. And in that, I played a character that it hit a little too close to home.
Hmm.
And for about 2.5 weeks after the show closed, it took me,
Sure.
and in 30 years, that's the only time that's ever happened. It was not
Hmm.
a case of, I don't think, the character kind of taking over, but the
Right.
character hit close to home. He meant a lot
Mm.
to me, and it uh, it was hard to kind of to shake the
Mhm.
character off. But usually, it's I leave work at work.
Sure.
I mean, in the case of Sisyphus Unbound, like we would do a take, and people would say, "I can't believe how nice you are compared to the character." And I said, "Thank God." I said, I did everything in my power to make sure that, guys, that's not really me. That's just I'm acting over here. I'm a nice guy.
That was like the story I heard. I think it was it was played by Topher Grace. He played Arian Rand in the Black
A
Klansman.
Black Klansman, yeah.
Yeah, and to where uh um you had Spike Lee feeding him lines, and he's like, after he'd get done with his scene, he's like, he made me say that because he just
I My favorite of that is in the 1950s, like Richard Widmark was doing a movie with Sidney Poitier called No Way Out.
Mm,
And Richard Widmark and they were good friends.
sure.
And Richard Widmark had to say the most awful,
Yeah.
awful things to this Sidney Poitier's character. And after every take, he would go up and say, "Sidney, I'm acting, right? Just, I mean, like," and he was like, Richard, or like, but it's because it's true, because you do want to, or Danny Aiello and Giancarlo Esposito
Yeah.
on Do the Right Thing. I
Hmm.
mean, and they said that doing those scenes was very hard for them
Hmm.
because they were both good friends and respected. But when the time comes, you got to do it.
Hmm.
And there's an authenticity that they brought. I mean, all you got to
Sure.
do is watch the intensity of that scene and Do the Right
Yeah.
Thing. And I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where the chill goes up your spine a little bit when you think about it, in a good way. I mean, because
Yeah.
that's just, yeah, but yeah, it's hard though.
I can imagine it's hard, but yeah, you want to bring that authenticity because then that comes across on screen. If you
Yeah,
don't, then it just feels like you're saying those lines. And I imagine there's got to be a trust. I mean, with acting, with I mean, you've been doing this for so long, you have to have trust with your other actors to say, okay, we're in the part, but when we're done, that's not us. That's
yeah.
just the character.
Oh yeah.
But
And in anything,
um,
whether you're if you're
mhm,
playing someone who's an unpleasant character, or if you're doing any kind of a scene where there's any kind of physicality, whether it's
sure.
fighting or anything like that, you always want to check in with your colleague to make
Mhm,
sure, because safety, and making sure that everybody's comfortable and
right.
relaxed.
Mm,
Because if you're the one of the things that I've learned, the more I do this, if you cannot do this work if you have tension
mm,
in your body,
mhm,
you have to be so relaxed, because when you're relaxed, you're
mhm,
open and available for anything, and then you're in the moment, and that's when the good stuff happens.
mhm.
But communication on a film set is everything.
So that's why I think you can always tell the younger performances because they're anxious going into it because they want to get it right and everything, and then that
Hmm.
anxiousness comes across on screen. Are there
Hmm.
any techniques or anything that you do to kind of help you stay chill?
I The key thing is to be as prepared as possible.
Hmm.
Like, I get that script, I memorize it cover to cover, and I know it so well that if when you're on set and things do change or pop
Sure.
up at the last minute, that you are so comfortable in the work that you're like, okay, like,
Hmm.
if a change happens, or if you're in the scene, or if something happens, like, if you and I are doing a scene and a coffee cup falls over, I'm not going to be like, "Oh my god, that's not what we rehearsed." And then, so like real life, you'd pick up the coffee cup, and you go on with the scene. And so the more I do a lot of breathing exercises.
Mm,
I always try to find a piece of music for a character,
mm,
like whether it's a
mhm.
piece of classical music or I'm a really big fan of film scores.
Oh, me too. Me
Oh
too.
man, for I use a lot of there's the sound the dramatic score for About Schmidt
Oh yeah.
that
Hmm.
Rolf Kent did, and
Hmm.
I use that for Doll It Up
Hmm.
because there's kind of like I don't know, you listen to it and it has this kind of like very nice, very sad kind of melodic,
Hmm.
and then it kind of turns into like the theme for like a sad sack. I don't, I don't know. It works,
Hmm.
but you find a right piece of music, finding like clothing, like
Sure.
Pe- Peter Falk says, find yourself a good jacket.
Of course, he would say
if,
that.
if you find yourself and it's like yeah if you find yourself a good jacket for or that thing that's gonna like be the
Mhm.
character. I
Right.
can't tell you how many times like I've put on a hat or a pair of glasses
Mhm.
or and it's like that's he's there
Mhm.
and it's like and it's fun. It's fun that it's like when you're a kid, you're playing dress up.
You're playing.
uh yeah, and that's it's more or less what we do.
Mhm.
And but no, the way to be relaxed is just, I do a lot of breathing
Sure.
exercises.
Sure.
Music helps.
Mhm.
Just taking care of
Mhm.
yourself as best you can, and just being prepared.
See,
Uh,
'cause you see some of those tropes in that come across in comedies about actors, but that's things that people do. The word play. Getting your mouth in order. The
oh, sure.
exercises.
Yeah.
The vocal exercises and all that. While they're played up as jokes, that's stuff actors do, isn't it? That they do.
Oh,
They,
yeah. Stay
uh,
hydrated and like and do things and you know drill the lines, like do
mhm.
it. One of the things I used to do when I was young, like, I would like, you run the lines and like you do I would do it like, well, how would Jimmy Stewart? And I would do like a bad Jimmy Stewart impression because or like a Marlon Brando,
Sure, sure,
or
sure,
Pacino or Christopher Walken. I mean, it makes it fun, but
sure.
like also it relaxes you in a way that and there are things that you find that like, oh, that doesn't sound half bad. But most of the time it's usually stuff that like, it's like, okay, I'm not doing that in the movie, but like but it relaxes
Um,
you. It gets
sure.
you to a place where if you know the dialogue and if you know it so well that you're able to do it any different way.
Mhm.
Whether you're doing it as a bad Brando impression or if you're doing it fast or slow
Sure.
or and but the key just to be as relaxed as much as possible. And that's something that it took me a long time to figure out because I
Mhm.
always like I would memorize the lines and I would get so like excited in a scene where
Mhm.
like you got to let a scene breathe. A scene is like it's like a bottle of wine. You got to open it up and just let the scene go. And in movies, with the power of editing,
Sure.
there are
Mhm.
things in movies that I thought were not good that they edited in a way where like, oh well, it makes sense when it's cut together like that. Now, of
Sure.
could you can't do that in the theater. There's
No.
pacing and all of
Yeah.
that. So, but yeah, no, but relaxation, that's the key to everything.
That's the key is to be relaxed. See, I'm not sure
Oh
if I
yeah.
could. I mean, I've had the honor of being asked a few times to be in a very small roles in a few movies.
Hmm.
But it's playing a movie reviewer, so it's in my wheelhouse. So I'm okay. It might be a little played up, but it's in my wheelhouse at least.
Sure.
But I can see where, being relaxed and open. And it's interesting you mentioned open because you've worked on a lot of the stuff work you've done is in indie films with
Hmm.
variety of casts in that. Have you found a range of say crew, especially directors, to where some are very intense and while others are more relaxed and open to things, or do they all seem fairly, you know, go
I
with the flow?
In my experience, like I found that a lot of indie crews are relaxed.
Hmm.
Relaxed. I mean, you have some that individuals that are very kind
Sure.
of
Hmm.
rigid, which I mean that's fine. I mean, it's I always think as the set is actor friendly. Now that
Hmm.
meaning that like, actors come in and like they have the lines and they're prepared, but that every you be open to ideas.
Hmm.
And and I would say most cases like Tom Angeletti, for example,
Hmm.
like he's very open for that. But also Tom is very prepared from a technical side. So whatever you do, he's going to catch it, and he and his
Sure.
crew are going to catch it. And that's one of the great things about working with him is
Hmm.
that he kind of, he if you're prepared and he leaves you
Hmm.
alone, and you do your thing, and then he's certainly doing his thing.
So, what would you say longest shoot you've done?
Oh God, the longest. Wow. Ah,
Because you do a lot of shorts, you've also done a few features, but I was just wondering what was like the longest. Uh,
wow. God. That's a nice thing about being a supporting actor mostly.
sure.
You
Hmm.
kind of wow, the one that comes immediately to mind, I wouldn't really say it was necessarily a long shoot, but it was I did another movie with Matthew Mailer that is on the verge of being finished called Protonopia.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's a horror feature film.
Hmm.
And that was a not a long, I guess, sort of a long shoot. I mean, we did that over my stuff over 3 days,
Hmm.
but they were three long days, but three
Sure.
enjoyable days. But like this character in this movie, he plays. I play a man whose father has died,
Hmm.
and the son has um, received
Sure.
the
Yeah.
family
Hmm.
home in the will, I guess,
Hmm.
and he suspects that the house might be haunted,
Ooh, exciting.
and
Okay. Yeah.
and I think the house has kind of started to
Mhm.
take him over a little
Right.
bit, and so it was a hard part
Hmm.
because you so many different kinds of emotions,
Sure. Hmm.
yeah, we would shoot late into the night, which
Hmm.
yeah, I would say as far as recently, that's probably the one. But it should be
Sure.
coming. Actually, I think it's fingers crossed that it's going to be finished in February.
Well, hopefully it is. We know how those things go, but
Oh yeah,
another horror film though. I mean, you were in Friends Forever too. You're
yeah, I know. And prior to that, I had not done many horror films, but this is
no.
Friends Forever is probably the first slasher film
Yeah.
that I'd ever done. I
Hmm.
remember I was on set with Tom, and I turned to Julie Carney and I said, it's funny, and I just occurred to me, this is the first like slasher film, and anyone who's seen the movie knows what
Yeah.
happens in the movie. Uh, Fun, a lot of fun,
Mhm.
messy, very messy,
I
but
bet.
fun. But yeah, I had a ball. But
Yeah.
we had this wonderful farm that was provided by
Mhm.
in Marion, Ohio, by Monica Decker, the producer, and it's
Mm.
just it's the kind of place that was ripe for a horror film. Like
It was. Yeah.
if they had this set in 1973, that's where Texas Chainsaw Massacre would have been filmed. That's how perfect this place was, and we just had a ball. Like, and
Hmm.
I did that in an afternoon, and no heavy lifting. I mean,
No.
I got that pipe lit on the first try, and
Oh, did you really?
I hadn't smoked a pipe, I think, for about 20 years, and it was this really really nice
Yeah.
clay carved pipe, and I thought I better take care of this thing, and I got it on the first. And I was like secretly like, good job, Tim, good job. And it's like those things that make you happy because it's kind of like you always want to get it on the first because it's
Sure.
like, that it's like, I was like, all right. You don't want to have to like, do this with the matches, like, because I've been there too. But
Sure.
But no, Protonopia as and Friends Forever, I like it. Like
Mm-hmm.
I like because within that, with Friends Forever especially, there was horror, there was suspense,
Hmm.
even a little comedy, which
Yeah.
I think when you can combine all of those
Hmm.
elements, that's all the better because audiences, they love that. I mean, they
Horror
love.
horror fans love that. It doesn't have to be a full comedy, but you do like a little joke or comic in your, basic horror film. It always helps a little bit.
Well, well, and all of those, those slasher movies from the 80s, like I remember watching like Graduation Day or
Oh
Happy
yeah.
Birthday to Me
Hmm.
or April Fool's Day and just I said this must have been fun to make because some of these things, I mean, you have the typical formulaic,
Hmm.
Friday the 13th style thing, movies that kind of took themselves a little too seriously in the
Right.
beginning, but they're fun. I mean, again, like messy, but fun.
Messy but fun. It's a good description for horror films,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah,
Uh, yeah, and for me, I'm a big horror consumer myself, and I grew up in the '80s, much like yourself, on all of those as well. And I think the best ones are effective that they can be serious, but they throw a little bit of comedy in it. And yeah, Friends Forever was nice that it threw it in there, even if the comedy's not like badum ching, it's
yeah,
still. The comedy comes in either the dialogue or the relationships, like when you get the banter among the friends a bit, that in Friends Forever, it was like, man, and then it ends with just whew, if you can get an actor that can play crazy, uh
yeah.
we,
Colleen O'Mara
oh,
was she was and everybody is
mhm,
just and they're fantastic performers and wonderful people and no, the movie is doing really
mhm.
really well and I'm very happy.
So what would you say is your favorite? Do you have a favorite type of character that you like to play?
Wow. God, it's hard. I mean, I like characters where you can dig deep.
Mhm.
Like like I think a lot of the characters that I've played are sort of extensions of me in a
Sure.
way.
Mhm.
Like I mean, I think every person, every actor has within them all of the kinds of experiences and jealousies and vulnerabilities that a lot of these
Sure.
characters have. But I really like the Gunthers and Dial
Mhm.
It Up or To Be Alone or Live Health.
Mhm.
Live Health. I'm biased because I wrote it and co-directed it, but
Live Health was fun. I enjoyed Live Health.
yeah,
I did.
that was a tough one because well during the
Mhm.
pandemic I had a panic attack
Oh,
as
yeah, sure. Yeah.
and I remember there was one day where it got to a point where I actually had to call one of those hotlines
Sure.
to to speak
Yeah.
to someone,
Come.
and
Yeah.
I called someone and they picked up the phone and someone picked up the phone and I just unloaded on them and I just told them
Sure.
everything.
Sure.
And after I told them there was a pause, and please hold, I'll get a doctor for you. So I had
Yeah.
unloaded to this secretary,
Sure. Sure.
and at that
Mm.
moment, that was the first time I laughed in like in a bit. But then I
Sure.
kind of thought, well, what do therapists during
Do.
COVID
Yeah.
and the
Yeah.
pandemic, what do they do?
Hmm.
And that kind of what led to that. And of course, I wanted to make a movie with my wife,
Sure. Sure.
and I thought, it was something to do. So I got a couple of my friends together, and they were nice enough to, and all of their stories and things that they
Sure.
said that was all improvised as well.
Oh,
So
nice.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm very proud of that one.
Yeah, that's a fun one, and that's one thing that I found during the pandemic interesting is the creative ways indie filmmakers decided to still do their craft because they had, you had to create, right? I mean, you're just sitting there, you're going, I've got all these ideas, I need to do something,
Yeah,
and after a while, so and so I've found some very creative things to come out of indie films, a lot of about grief. I know we talked earlier, you take a picture, but I noticed a trend in indie. scene, especially whether it's horror, drama, even comedy, a lot dealing with grief. Uh,
I think a lot of that has to do with, no matter what anyone's opinion is on,
right.
the last couple of years, I think we can all agree that everyone had this shared experience. I mean, for me,
Mhm.
my thing was, it was the first time that I ever experienced despair,
Mhm.
which was scary.
Right.
Because I mean, I'd managed to live over 40 years of my life and never reached
Sure.
that point. And I think that, and of course, you come through it on the other side because
Right.
I have, my amazing wife and my son, and
Mm.
and the thing is, you realize also that you have to. Richard Burton said something really interesting years ago when he was asked about how he battles alcoholism.
Mhm. Mhm.
And when you battle kinds of things, whether it's mental health or alcoholism or
Right.
whatever the ailment may be, it's kind of, he used the analogy of a boxer. It's like
Mm.
you wake up every day and you fight this
Sure.
being, and you can't let your guard down. And I think that may be why, like, projects like Live Health and
Mhm.
Hard Truths and After, and even in many ways like Paul Laurence Dunbar, An American Poet,
Mhm.
not really so much about despair, but about digging for something deeper, something
Mhm.
more meaningful. And I think that's what myself and I think a lot of artists were really interested in probing in the years after COVID. But
Well,
I do agree. I think we do need to laugh too.
we do need to laugh. Well, that's okay. I'll just put in Clue from 1980. Oh, is that not a clinic on comedy? I mean, if there's anybody who needs to know how to do comedy, watch like Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, and Clue,
I
and
think
you
all you
got
have to do is watch anything that Madeline Kahn did.
oh,
High anxiety,
anxiety.
oh my God. And even like, there she had like a part in, not a great movie, but like in City Heat
Oh yeah. Hmm.
with Clint Eastwood and
Hmm.
Burt Reynolds. Like she just had that way about her, like
Hmm.
that she could just be without even really trying, but like just using her voice and her, like, but she was funny. I remember when she
Oh
passed away, that was when, like, oh God, that's too soon, like
yeah.
she still had a lot of great work
Hmm.
in here. She was doing a lot of, I saw her on stage in Wendy Wasserstein's play, the Sisters Rosenzweig, and
Oh nice.
she was extraordinary.
Hmm.
As she was extraordinary live, just because she was just so naturally talented and so naturally funny. But Clue, I think when
Oh.
Madeline Kahn, Clue is probably the thing that the first thing that people will probably bring up.
Clue is one of those things where people say, "What comedy? If you had one comedy to recommend, would it be?" I go Clue. And they're like, "What?" I showed it to my friend, and you're a movie watcher as well as an actor, but it's always good when you have a film that you love and you recommend it to someone.
Uh
We
huh.
sat down with a friend of mine who had never seen Clue. We sat down and watched it, and halfway through the film, he goes, "How have I not seen this film until now?"
And it's the thing is, it's like, it's an intro. I love like the backstories that come out, like about the movies like that, like 20, 30 years later. Like, it was not a box office
No.
hit, as I recall. Um, I think Leslie Ann Warren was a last minute
Yeah.
casting. I
Yep.
think Carrie
Yeah.
Fisher, I think, was
Hmm.
gonna play that part. Would have been great, but Leslie Ann Warren brought that almost like a Barbara Stanwyck, like
A little
that
extra
grit.
sass. I mean, Carrie,
Yeah.
her Leslie Ann's sass was different than Carrie. Carrie would have brought a little bit more, I think, maybe aggressive sass, whereas Leslie Ann's was definitely more Madam Sass, like,
Yeah.
matter of fact, confident. Carrie, I think, would have brought a little bit more edge, like, to it. But
Like, and that cast too. I mean, the
oh,
cast was, I mean, that was Christopher Lloyd, I think, before Back to the Future and
Yeah, it
Michael
was.
McKean, and that was the first thing I had never heard of Tim Curry before. Like I
Oh,
think
sure.
I was probably 10 years old when I first saw the movie, and I thought,
Hmm.
oh, he was just this great English actor. And then like once you get to know, I saw that, and then I saw his Pennywise, and I could and I
Oh,
thought, and he was
yeah,
terrifying in that. And then, of course, as you get older,
yeah.
you go and see Rocky Horror and know that he had originated the role of Mozart and
Mhm.
Amadeus on stage. I mean, like, but yeah, no, Wadsworth is,
That
God,
that's one of those movies where you laugh when you first watch it, and then when you watch it again, you're laughing before the joke comes because you know the joke is coming, and then you're laughing even more. It was just like Mel Brooks. I love the work of Mel Brooks, but his
hmm,
two, I mean, two back to back, Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein, within like a year of each other, and
yeah,
you those two films, side hurting laughter. And I remember when Blazing Saddles got into the social mix, as you mentioned, social media, because of the anniversary, and how
yeah,
some people were like, "Oh, that film is such and such," and then you had other people go, "Have you watched the movie?"
yeah.
They're like, it's exactly the opposite type of movie that you're saying.
Well, and you think about a movie like Blazing Saddles, like whenever that's brought up, like
Yeah.
or when Norman Lear passed away, and they were
Mhm.
talking about All in the Family, says, oh, those shows
Yeah.
couldn't do them today, which is amazing to me because when Blazing Saddles came out, we were still in the midst of Vietnam. We
Mhm.
had a president that was just had to resign. I mean, things were not going
No.
well. And yet somehow we were still able to keep our sense of humor, or All in the
Mhm.
Family, of course. But
Right.
now, and of course, if they did it today, it would just be different. Like they
Mhm.
wouldn't be able to. It's like a lot of those movies from, like, if they tried to remake The Godfather today, or which I hope they never do. Um,
Yeah.
but like they couldn't do them the way that they did it.
Right.
I mean, so,
But
but
yeah, I
now,
mean, Blazing Saddles, I mean, you look at who the lead character is, who the smartest character is in that film, how the rest of it's like, where are you getting? It's like, I understand on the surface, but if you pay attention to what's actually going on, it's a brilliant film that he fought creative control for.
oh yeah,
He said, yeah, if I do this, I get to say.
and Gig Young, a
Mhm.
fantastic actor who was originally cast as the Waco Kid. I mean, he really drank, but I can't picture anyone other than
Mhm.
Gene Wilder, which Gene Wilder as, like, the gunslinger. I mean, like, but it's just hysterical.
Mhm.
But like, and even with, like, they wanted Richard, or originally wanted Richard Pryor to play, but Cleavon Little was so perfect, and him and Gene Wilder just worked so wonderfully together.
Cleavon is and that's what's funny is I watch that film and I hear the stories of how Richard Pryor was supposed to be that, and I'm like, I just don't see it. Cleavon was stage performer, much like came from
Yeah,
stage, and I just don't see it because that character, that he's Bart, it's like, yeah, I think my favorite scene in that is where he's giving the speech after Bart gets insulted on the street corner by the old lady, and
sure.
yeah, and you can see it. And Mel Brooks is doing it on purpose. They're doing this one long shot, and he's doing the monologue, and you see Cleavon trying so hard not to laugh. I mean, how do you as an actor do that? Because you can see it's like hurting him that he
Oh,
can't laugh.
there are times that, like, I mean, on stage,
Yeah.
I mean, a couple of years ago, I did an original play called The Asphalt Christmas, where
Mhm.
we would break up sometimes. It was like, I was like Harvey Korman breaking up when Tim Conway
Conway.
used to break him up. And it's just, I mean, most of the time you try to, like, you bite your tongue or bite your
Hmm.
cheek, but mostly, God, it's just hard. But no, and I was so happy that Mel Brooks got an honorary Oscar. I
Yeah,
mean,
finally, yeah.
it's amazing that when you think about, like, where he started and where he came from, like being in
Mhm.
just to be a fly on that wall, to be on one of the writers on your show of shows with
Oh
Larry
yeah.
Gelbart and Neil Simon, and of course Mel Brooks and Carl Reiner and Imogene Coco and Howard Morris, and like my God, like no, how do you get Woody Allen? Like how do you get all of that in one room? Is extraordinary. I mean, now you do that for a movie. If they're all getting $20 million, that's going to bankrupt the studio. So
There goes your budget. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and it's funny. It's because a lot of those folks started from smaller indie projects. I
Hmm.
mean, do you run into that still today? I mean, there's a lot more content, a lot more indie stuff being made now,
Hmm.
but is there still a stigma out there possibly with, oh, that's an indie project, or that's an indie film, or you're an indie actor, or
I get that sometimes. It's
Mhm.
like, oh, you're an indie actor, which I don't know. Yeah, I
What
mean,
that
it's like,
means, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of like I mean, considering the company of indie actors, like, I mean, just a couple rattle off a couple names. I mean, Parker Posey, Steve Buscemi, Seymour Cassell, John Cassavetes was like probably the first, or Sam
Mhm.
Fuller, the first indie directors. I mean, people may not know this. Martin Scorsese, Boxcar Bertha is kind of an independent
I've got
film, or,
I've got
yeah,
Boxcar Bertha up on my shelf here from Dollar Tree. I got it.
underrated
It
movie.
is.
David Carradine, when he was good, he was good.
Oh, yeah.
He was really good. And
Mhm.
I mean, he did some not so great movies, but like man, he but yeah, there is, and you just kind of ignore it. I mean,
Mhm.
you just it's kind of my thing is, it's like, the work is the work, whether
Sure.
you're in a $600 million movie or an indie film.
Mhm.
Granted, I mean, the catering table is going to be much better
Sure. The
but
quality of donuts will be different.
yes, the quality of the but I love the experiences that I've had in the indie world are
Mhm.
the more memorable, because you develop a camaraderie, like
Mhm.
an ensemble
Yep.
mentality, like you do in the theater. um I mean, in the case of After, it was Beth Metcalf, myself, Tom Angeletti, Maya Ahmed, who is the AD on the film, Robert Morris and Alex Johnson and Jake Reynolds.
Mhm.
It was a small crew, and we managed to organize incredible organization. We shot a 13-page dramatic film, two-hander, in about 5 or 6 hours. We
Wow.
got we got it done because
Mhm.
everyone on that crew had a good sense of humor, had a good attitude, had a good work ethic, and we were able to do it, and to do something that everyone is very proud of. Hard Truth, same thing. I mean, even with an improvised a film through an improvisation, we were able to accomplish that in probably like 5 or 6 hours. And and we were able to do that because you come in with a good attitude, good
Mhm.
work ethic, good sense of humor, but ready to work, but to do it in a way where everyone is going to be happy
Sure.
with the product. And
Right.
so that's like, I'll take the indies over
Mhm.
the sitting around for 17 hours on a set. I'll take that
For one
anytime.
scene. Yeah. I've seen some indie actors that I've talked to who managed to be like extras or small parts on bigger budget, like the big Hollywood films, and they're like,
Hmm.
yeah, I showed up at set at 6 a.m. It's now 3 in the afternoon. We haven't shot the scene yet. I've gone through the craft table. We're sitting here talking. They're just sitting waiting for the scene to ever
Oh
be
yeah.
set up.
Yeah, I did
Meanwhile,
that years ago. Yeah, I did that for television. And like
mhm,
I mean, the good thing about doing that was that I remember there was a TV show called Kings that Ian
mhm,
McShane was
mhm,
on,
yeah.
and I got to watch him work
Mm.
for about 14 hours. and that because I was always a big fan of his show Lovejoy
Oh yeah.
and Deadwood, and he was all I always thought he was an underrated actor,
Oh yeah.
and I got to watch him work, and so but most of the time, and when you watch, we were on set 14 hours, and when you actually saw the scene, I think it was like about 90 seconds. So 14 hours for
Sure.
90 seconds. But it all of that kind of stuff, yeah, you kind of just wonder, like, my God, they can't do this a little faster, but yeah.
Well, I mean, it's like what you're seeing now at the Oscars, which you've got Godzilla. Like I saw Godzilla minus one. I don't know if you're a monster film guy or not,
Somewhat, yeah, yeah,
but I saw Godzilla minus one and it blew me away for many reasons. I'm a big Godzilla fan, but I was
sure.
surprised of just how such a well-rounded, solid, emotional film it is. I highly recommend it if you're looking for, if
Oh,
there's a monster film to watch, because it covers topics of PTSD, of
mm,
survivor guilt, of all. It's more than just I went in figuring, oh, I'm gonna just get my kaiju big monster film, and I watch it and like, holy crap, this is a war picture that just happens to have the big Godzilla in it, but it's very meaningful. But you look at the effects and everything, and they did that for like $15 million or less, depending on who you ask. And I look at that and I go, man, you've got these other films that are like $200 million that don't come off as great, that are missing the mark. And you're like, what is doing wrong? And that's why I like the indie films and indie scene, because you have people who are hungry, people who are they're really doing this. Some are doing it to build their resume, while others, though, a lot of them are in there just for the craft, like you are. You're taking roles, you're taking things, you're doing things you want to do. And I'm not
mhm.
saying the other, any performers in the big Hollywood stuff, but it just seems like the attitude or the energy's different a lot of times.
I,
I just talked to a director, John Keys, who did this film Cult Killer, which has Antonio Banderas and Alice Eve in it. Two
mm,
folks who were in big Hollywood. I mean, Antonio Banderas.
sure.
And Banderas is great. They're both great in it. They didn't phone it in. Here is this kind of direct to video, limited theatrical release type of film, and they nail it. And they look more relaxed and like they're having fun than on the big Hollywood films that they've done.
I think in my experience, like with the indies, you get to really sink your teeth into good writing.
Mhm.
And at the end of the day, that's what an actor, or that's what you really look for. You really look for the kinds of stuff that's going to scare you and stuff. Oh wow, I've never seen this before. I've never seen or this take on it,
Sure.
or like or this is something different. This is
Mhm.
something unique that and that's with indies. I mean, that's the power. I
Mhm.
mean, I think it it kind of creates a little bit more work for yourself because you the filmmaker kind of have to do like what John Cassavetes did. He wasn't getting any studio support, so
Mhm.
he had to be the one that went to the actual movie theaters to
Sure.
distribute it himself, and he would have to do movies that he really didn't want to do, but he made the
Sure.
money. uh Jenna Rowlands was telling a story. There was a movie he did called 2 Minute Warning with
Mm.
Charlton Heston,
Okay, yeah.
and he made, or and I think he was like the second or third lead in the film, and he was one of those like kind of sort of disaster films.
Right.
And but the money he made from that, he was able to make opening night,
Sure.
which, well, Jenna Rowan said he made all of this money on 2 Minute Warning. We made opening night and lost almost our entire house because, but it's
Yeah.
like, but John would always say, well, opening night they're going to be studying in film schools. They're not going to be
Right.
studying 2 Minute Warning in film schools, which is true. So
And that reminds me of Burton. They interviewed Tim Burton at one point, and he said, how do you do these Hollywood pictures? And then he does these more. He goes, well, I do those so I can pay for the films I want to do,
oh sure, I mean,
basically.
oh yeah, I mean, Steven Soderbergh and George Clooney and all of them have been very open about the
Yeah.
Ocean's 11 movies. They're fun movies. They make monies, but like from that, they're able to go and make Good Night and Good Luck,
Mhm.
or a lot of those movies where they. you may not expect a huge box office return.
Right.
But you never know. Like, I mean, as far as like movies this year, like my vote for best movie of the year is The Holdovers. Like that to me is like an indie movie, like, and
Uh-huh.
it has
Uh-huh.
flashes of one of my favorite filmmakers from the 70s, who was Hal Ashby.
Okay. Yep.
Hal Ashby, like, he directed Harold and Maude
Hmm.
and The Landlord and, oh God, Coming Home and Being There and Shampoo. And like he just had one of the greatest runs through the 1970s. And they had a very indie
Hmm.
feel to them. And it's like those are movies like they couldn't be made the way they were made today. Like they're like beautiful paintings, and they couldn't be made that way. The way today. So it's
Yeah. Holdovers I wasn't completely blown away with it, but I didn't expect the complete 70s aesthetic, so I appreciated that right away.
yeah.
And it's such a character-driven piece that Paul Giamatti and Randolph, uh the actress in it, I always keep messing up her name, I apologize, but those two alone are the reason to watch it. I mean,
Hmm.
I loved the interaction between them. I think that's Giamatti's year to get it. I hope he does because
I with all I haven't seen Oppenheimer yet, because when you have a 6-year-old watching a 3-hour movie, you gotta.
that's a tough one to
I mean,
watch. Yeah.
we just did Killers of the Flower Moon the other night, which is 3.5. We spaced it out over a couple of
Ah, well,
hours,
that's
but
good. Yeah.
yeah, but I and actors like Paul Giamatti is an example of like an actor that I admire, like him or Gene Hackman
Mm,
or Kathy Bates or the character actors who
right.
can play the leads, but the stuff that they do are is always the good writing.
Hmm.
It always comes down to the good writing, and that they're able to like elevate it.
Hmm.
And because you look at like whenever anyone's if Paul Giamatti's doing a movie, whether he's playing a lead or a supporting, and it's like, well, he's automatically elevating the movie because
Yeah.
just his presence. Philip Seymour Hoffman has that.
Oh,
Patricia Clarkson has that. To draw you in, because you always know that they're always going to be good because they always make smart choices. And that's really what I'm about. Like I always want to do stuff that I would think that I would want to see.
sure.
And
Hmm.
that like the kinds of stories that would interest me. But I get out of my zone every once in a while. Like
Hmm.
I mean, Friends Forever was something different for me. Like
I was gonna say it was different to see it a role like that. I was like, wow. I'm like,
I hadn't really been like a horror film nut
uh-huh.
since I was a kid, but I had a blast. But
Yeah,
because of my trust in who was making the film,
right.
that was like I knew
Mhm.
I was going to be in good hands.
And you were it's a very effective like I was surprised you were in a film because I was like, okay, we're going into this. I'm like, oh wait, Timothy's in okay, all
I know.
right. I'm
So,
getting the vibe. All right.
yeah, some people had said like, "Oh, that was kind of a delightful surprise," but
Yeah.
like, yeah, no, it was fun.
Yeah, for me, the character actor who will draw me in, who I'll just watch it just because their name's in there, is Gary Oldman. For me,
Oh, yeah.
he is so fun to watch, no matter what role. It's like, yeah, I'm there.
I remember the first thing I ever saw him in, it was 1986, and I was in fourth grade, and my brother Kevin was babysitting me and my brother, and my parents had gone out for the night, and he rented this movie. It was Sid and Nancy.
Oh,
And my youngest brother had fallen asleep, and I'm sitting there watching this movie, and I have no idea who
sure.
the Sex Pistols are or
Hmm.
anything of that. And I'm just watching this guy. I thought I was watching a documentary
Hmm.
because he was so like, well,
Yeah,
one, I mean, going back, my brother Kevin had said he looked like Sid Vicious.
sure. Yeah.
Um, and that always stuck with me.
Hmm.
And then like but he's also one of the only actors that he could choose scenery, and like in The Professional, I mean, he choose that scenery like,
He does.
like,
Yeah.
but it works.
Hmm.
It works. there are certain actors, like there's a danger to them that, and
Hmm.
he has it. Christopher Walken has it.
Hmm.
I think George C. Scott had it. Like there
Hmm.
was like a Sean Penn, like a danger and an unpredictability. But Gary Oldman, it's interesting. I think it took people 25 years to realize how good he really is. Like
Yeah,
when he did Churchill and
right.
Mank, and I haven't seen this new TV show that he's on, Slow Horses, but it's supposed to be really, really
Hmm.
marvelous. But oh, Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy. I
Oh
mean,
yeah. Oh man.
like, but like talk about variety.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, alone, like Sid Vicious, Winston Churchill. He just played Harry Truman, I think, in
Yeah.
Oppenheimer.
Hmm.
Commissioner Gordon, of course. I mean, like just
Zurg from Fifth Element for
yeah, Dracula. I mean,
Dracula.
but like what extraordinary choices. And
Hmm.
yeah, he's another one that, like, I mean, because you watch him and you know that you're gonna get something interesting, and
You are.
you're gonna get something unique. And yeah, even like Murder in the First, like
Hmm.
he played like
Oh
the
man.
warden, like really underrated
Chilling.
film. Chilling. Or The Contender.
Hmm.
And it's rare that he's played a good guy, but he did a movie called Criminal Law
Hmm.
with whereas I think he was the good guy and Kevin Bacon was the
Oh
bad
yeah.
guy.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think it came out in like 1988, but
Hmm.
like I remember that one too. So yeah, Gary Oldman,
Yeah.
my God, yeah.
That's my actor who, if I see him in a big Hollywood, I'm like, I'm gonna see it. I don't even know if it's in my wheelhouse, but I don't care because he's.
Well, all we got to do now is somehow get Paul Giamatti and Gary Oldman in a movie together,
Oh well,
and
there we go. And well, and you,
oh,
sir, because
oh God, yes. Oh my God. I would, if I would be like, just a fly on the wall, like, just to be in that room,
uh,
like, that would be, the joy.
you wouldn't mind being patron at table number one. You would
I would gladly just, yeah, just be
just to see
patron,
them. Yeah.
just to see him in action. I mean, like, I did background work on Billions when it
Mhm.
first came on, and and Paul Giamatti was maybe about 25, 30 feet away from me, and
Mhm.
like just like the man. I
He's
mean,
the
like
man. Yeah.
from the first time I saw him, I think the first time I saw him was in Private Parts
Hmm.
in the theater, and I like, you don't think, you're watching like a Howard Stern, who
Right.
I'm a huge fan of, but like you don't think that you're going to see like a really revelatory performance. And I thought, wow. I remember sitting up and like, wow, this guy is stealing this movie, and it was great. I mean, so you love that, and that's why I love the character actors, because that's what I've always aspired to be. I mean, I've said this in other interviews, like a good character actor is like the sixth man on a basketball team.
Mhm.
They come off the bench, they score their points or make their defensive play, and then they sit down.
Mhm.
And that to me is like, that's a good supporting actor.
Well, and you're in it for the craft then necessarily. You're not necessarily in it to be like the star, but you're doing it because it's a character you challenges you, which
Oh
is,
yeah. Brian Cox was telling a funny story when they were making Troy. Him
mm,
and Brendan Gleeson were hanging around, and like somebody asked him about, like, do you like being a supporting actor? And he said, well, let me give you an idea of what, my day has been like. And my day compared to Brad Pitt's day. Brad Pitt, yes, he's the star, but he's being pulled away to this interview, to that interview. He's getting pictures of,
yeah.
with promos for the poster. Whereas Brendan Gleeson and I, we're sitting over here talking to Peter O'Toole and Julie Christie and saying, okay, what was that Mirage scene like in Lawrence of Arabia, or Dr. Zhivago? So it's
Yeah,
like I said, I love being a supporting actor
sure.
because you don't have to have the movie on your shoulders.
Right.
You could
Right.
just you show up, you do your
Mhm.
job. As Maureen Stapleton said, you show up, you do your job, you get paid, and you go home.
Which is kind of the story for some indie actors as well. You
Yeah.
show up, you do your job, and you go home, and you have something that hopefully entertains, which you have a large variety of films that I think I've found entertaining over the years. And I very much appreciate getting to talk to you, sir. And I guess my last question then, knowing you're a soundtrack, I know we kept you kind of long. I appreciate it
Sure,
quite a
sure.
bit. Favorite soundtrack then? You're a soundtrack.
Ooh.
If you're a soundtrack, we could talk for another. I love soundtracks. What's your favorite? What would you say your
Mm.
desert island soundtrack would be?
Oh God, the desert island. The one I've been listening to a lot recently is it's a soundtrack to a movie that I don't think did very well when it came out,
Mhm.
but it's Thomas Newman's score to Meet Joe Black.
Oh yeah, I've got yeah. Hmm.
and and that movie, I mean, that movie to me, it had all the elements, like
Hmm.
it had. And but for whatever reason, well, one, it's very long, it's three
It's
hours
long.
it's long, and there's really like four movies going on here.
Hmm.
And but I remember, like, there are some really wonderful moments, and that music. And Thomas Newman is a favorite composer. I love James Horner
Oh
and
yeah,
Jerry
Horner. Hmm.
Goldsmith. I got to go with the classics. I also love Elmer Bernstein, Magnificent Seven or The Great Escape.
Uh-huh.
But now I would say, if I had one, it would have to be a recent. It would have to be
Meet
Thomas Newman's, yeah, Meet Joe
Meet
Black.
Your Black. See, and I've always liked Thomas Newman's work more than Randy, in all honesty. No offense to Randy. I like Randy Newman's work, but I like Thomas Newman's work a little better. For me, it'd be it's funny because I had grown up, the first movie I ever saw in the theaters was Star Wars. I was 2.5 years old. My parents took me. The big story my parents always used to say is they just potty trained me. They took me to see Star Wars at 2.5 years old. They said they literally had to pry me from the chair to take me to the bathroom halfway through the film because they said I was so engrossed in the movie that, and and then Jaws is the reason I was born. That's a whole nother story. Quick, quick, quick story there. My mom, because I was born in 75, um, Jaws had come out. That was the first big blockbuster. So it kind of
Sure.
all the movie components fell into why I love films. But they stood in line for 2.5 hours. My mom was 7 months pregnant, 8 months pregnant. Yeah, 8 months pregnant at the time. And they stood in line for like 2.5 hours to see the film because,
Wow.
there was no multiplexes. It was single screen
Yeah.
theaters. So they stood in line and they watched the film. And she said she went with my uncle and my dad and they watched the movie. And every time there was a jump or whatnot, they turned her, and go, "You're okay, you're okay." She was fine. Well, a week later, she's reading the book, and she gets to the scene where they're chumming, and Jaws pops out for the first time. You're gonna need a bigger boat. She
Uh-huh.
gets to that point, it makes her jump, and her water broke. So Jaws is the reason why I was.
Love it. Love it.
But so movies have been always been a part of my life, I guess. But for me, it's not Star Wars, though. I love the John Williams stuff and everything.
Mhm.
For me, I guess my Desert Island score would be Basil Poldoris's Conan the Barbarian.
Oh, I love what he did with the Lonesome Dove
Yeah.
soundtrack. Oh,
Hmm.
but I like that. I've been listening to that a little bit as well, because
Hmm.
I mean, I used to watch those movies when I
Sure.
was a kid.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, they're fun. And but yeah, now he and Quigley Down Under. He
Hmm.
also really underrated Tom Selleck film. And but like all of these, like the scores, like they're very effective
Hmm.
in getting you, the artist, into, like, a zone in a way. It's
Sure.
kind of like they put you in like a time or place. Like, if you're doing, like, whenever I've done Shakespeare, I always go to Patrick Doyle, who
Okay.
had
Yeah.
done a lot of Kenneth Branagh stuff, like
Hmm.
Henry V or Much Ado About Nothing, and that gets you into the Shakespeare.
Hmm.
Like, there's something about it that, like, makes you just want to start spouting iambic pentameter. Um, but like, there's just stuff also that, as you're out, if I'm out walking my dog, and like I'll get like the Rudy soundtrack
Oh,
that
sure.
Jerry Goldsmith did, or
Hmm.
any of the Star Trek
Hmm.
themes. I mean, like, it's just cool. I have to admit also, when I've walked to the supermarket, I have walked to the supermarket listening to the Shaft soundtrack. And
The
that's
Shaft soundtrack is amazing. I
that
love
that
the Shaft.
it's kind of cool when you're walking around the supermarket trying to get potato chips and you hear Isaac Hayes. It's just like,
Trying
you
to fight
feel
off the strut a little bit. Yeah.
yeah, I know. I mean, whatever kind of strut I have, but it's like stuff like that. Like I always think I'm going to bump into someone I know. Like Tim, what are you doing? Like just listen to Shaft.
Listen to Shaft. Yeah.
Nothing weird about that. But
See, and that's for me. I discovered there was more than just because if you're not paying attention, you may realize there's more than just two or three composers out there. There's many composers out there, but you only hear the certain ones. But Basil Polidorus's score for Conan, I always bring it up just because I'm like, you have Arnold Schwarzenegger who barely knew English, who
hmm
maybe has, you know, 3 pages of dialogue total, if you depending on which cut of the film you have, you know,
yeah,
but there's a section of the film, and this is why I love this score, is because there's a section of the film where your main character for 20 minutes doesn't have a single line of dialogue in that film. Conan, from when he gets caught by James Earl Jones' character to when he gets battle at the mounds, there's 20 minutes where he doesn't say a line of dialogue. So you've
that's
got to
right.
do something for the emotion, even though you've got some good supporting cast. So that score so stands on its own, but at the same time is such a character in the film. I
hmm
love those scores that can do that. Or Hunt for Red October.
Oh
That
yeah.
that opening theme for Hunt for Red October is just, oh, you're just like, what you're in for. You're like, oh
And I,
yeah.
and I remember going to the movie theater in 1989 when Batman came out, where
Oh,
you saw the Warner Brothers and you
mhm.
heard that Danny Elfman. That's another one I go to, the Danny Elfman Batman score,
Oh
and
yeah.
and like that score was like in a lot of his Tim Burton's films. It's like another character,
Right.
Beetlejuice,
Oh
as
yeah.
well. I mean, just on a that's really effective. I mean, the
Mhm.
fact that John Williams is
Doing
still
that. Yeah.
doing it. I mean,
Yeah.
which is extraordinary. And I'm going to butcher Michael Giacchino.
Yeah,
I
Giacchino.
butcher.
Yep. Mhm.
He's another one that
Mhm.
but there's so many, and
There are, yeah.
it really does it really is like you say, another character in the movie.
Mhm. Yeah, those are my favorite scores. And I think, the newer scores, I feel bad for the newer composers because there's so many other special effects and things worked into it now that you don't always hear their score like you used to.
Yeah.
They give the score a chance to breathe more. And this is just a get off my lawn moment. It is a simple fact. Those films, those sound designs allowed that score to come through a lot more than I think you get today. They're more noticeable because they aren't mixed with so many sound effects. You've got a chance to listen to them.
Well, and when you watch a movie like The Magnificent Seven, like, when you
Oh,
saw, like, I mean, it was like the way a movie started.
mhm.
Like, you had this rousing Elmer Bernstein, or The Big Country, or,
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Ennio
oh,
Morricone.
yeah, I mean, like, all of that. Like, Once Upon a Time in the West,
Yes.
Once Upon a Time in America, like, well, depending on which version of
Which
Once Upon a
version?
Time in
Yeah.
America, it's very important. I saw the re-release. I think it was like over 4 hours at Lincoln Center a couple years ago, and James
Mhm.
Woods and Robert De Niro were there,
Oh
and
wow.
they were in tears because
Mhm.
they were sad that Sergio Leone, who
Mhm.
fought. I mean, that I think that experience of making that, I think, led to his, because he was so heartbroken.
Yeah.
But they were heartbroken that he couldn't be there to see that finally his movie was released the way he had intended, and
Yeah.
the way it should be seen. I mean, it's a long movie, but God, it's a beautiful movie, and that score is it's extraordinary,
Yeah.
and as were all of his scores.
Oh, absolutely. But yeah, and it's funny with Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. If you look at one of the more popular tracks, which is Ecstasy of Gold, where that
Sure.
falls in the movie, it's actually not really at an epic part. It's like after the climax and everything,
Yeah.
but that track is just so spot. You're just like, I could just listen to that for a long time.
You watch it and okay, we're about to throw down. That's a throwing down music right there.
Yeah, that definitely is. And I could talk to you forever, but I will definitely not keep you too long here, sir. What do you got coming up next? Then
Let's see. This year God, I guess we are in a new year.
we are.
I have a new film that I'm working on called Without Her that I think
Mhm.
we're going to start going into production very, very soon. It's a really interesting Beth Metcalf
Oh,
is going to be
okay. Mhm.
starring in it, and it's told from the perspective of Beth's character is in a very abusive relationship,
Mm.
and the relationship is seen through the eyes of her family dog, and
Oh,
so and how what the dog
sure.
sees and how
Mhm.
they're affected by it. And I play a supporting role of a police officer in the film, and good group of people. Jake Reynolds, who is the DP on After, is going to be on board for this one as well.
Mm.
I have two comedies that I have written that I hope
Hey, all right.
we hope to do.
Mhm.
One is a comedy called Sundays with Dad.
Mhm.
That it's a two-hander that Tom Angeletti is gonna
Sure.
direct that we hope to do this spring, and it's a father-son, very sweet
Sure.
comic
Mhm.
piece, and then another one that we hope to do in the fall of next year, which is another comedy drama called Hall of Famers. So
Oh.
trying to get away from the grief kind of stuff, but yeah, we'll see.
You get what part comes across your table, right?
Yeah, and as soon as Protanopia comes out, you'll be one of the
Mhm.
first people that gets it because I
Oh,
know that
oh, thank you.
it's this one. It's about 2.5 years in the making. Like
Sure.
I went
Mhm.
back to New York a couple of years ago to work on it, and oh, I forgot. I have another comedy,
Ooh.
a film that I worked on last year called Static Cling. That it's kind of like it's an ensemble comedy that was
Mhm.
shot in a Brooklyn laundromat.
Oh,
That
nice.
that was a blast. And I play a guy that he's trying to get a Hershey bar out of a vending machine, and we've all been there when you're
Oh,
at the
yeah. Oh,
laundromat
yeah.
and you can't get the damn candy bar
Yeah.
out, and so he tries everything in his power, and he's just
Uh,
this quirky, unusual little
sure.
character that I jumped at the opportunity to play.
Mm.
So
Fantastic. Anything you're directing coming up yet, or
no, I mean, like, never say never, but like
right.
directing and producing, that's hard.
That's I've heard, yeah. That's
I mean, being an actor is hard enough, but like,
sure.
and writing a
Mhm.
script. But if the right thing comes along, and I think that I would be the one that would be a good fit for it from that standpoint, I would say sure.
Fantastic. And where can people catch your stuff, sir? Do you on the social medias or
Sure, I'm on Facebook, on Instagram. I still use Twitter or whatever it's called these days.
whatever it's called, yeah.
Twitter X, or I
Mhm.
don't, Elon Musk. I don't know. I mean, it's like I don't even know it, but I still use it. And of course, my demo reel and everything is all on IMDb. I use
Mhm.
that. It's kind of like I kind of use it as sort of my website because it's
Sure. Mhm.
the information. It's
All
there
right
all
there,
in one
yeah.
place, all pretty
Mhm.
comprehensive, and yeah, it's all there.
Fantastic. Well, this has been a delight. Thank you so much, Tim. I'm glad we finally got to talk.
Thank you, Mark.
Appreciate it quite a bit. And yeah, folks, check out all of Tim's stuff. A lot of the shorts are online now. Some of the older work, I think, are on YouTube's and such.
Oh yeah,
And keep up with Tim's stuff. So thank you very much, sir. And yeah, I hope to talk to you again.
absolutely. Thank you, Mark. Appreciate it.